School. The one thing that has historically been the biggest obstacle for MMORPG-obsessed teenagers to overcome. Whether it be in the late 90s with games like EverQuest, mid to late 2000s during the height of World of Warcraft, and of course the late 2000s game of RuneScape. For teenagers looking to maximize their time immersed within these online worlds, engaging in a myriad of different activities, school has often been the force that prevented them from dedicating their lives to their game of choice. Of course, some teenagers have been able to overcome obstacles like school by doing things like, well, dropping out. I am more so talking about the ones that wished for a future for themselves that is not just balding in their mother's attic. But while now in the early 2020s you rarely see teenagers finding their way into the MMORPG genre, opting instead to play games like Fortnite, Minecraft, or Among Us, there are still some trickling into these online adventures that are actually teenagers, not just some creepy old guy pretending to be a 16-year-old girl. I stand among these few that find themselves drawn into MMOs, my game of choice of course being Final Fantasy XIV, and I too stood in front of the obstacle known as school, only to finally conquer it. Well, kinda. Welcome to probably the most random video on my channel about the most random FF14 story I have to tell, but is one I want to nonetheless. So as always, my name is Lokidum, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. No matter how much time advances, one thing remains near universally true. Public school computers are absolute dog shit that can barely run 2 tabs of any internet browser, and are often running an operating system that they really don't have the power to run. We're talking about machines that were bought 5 years ago, but were manufactured 10 years ago and were mid to low end even then. So even if you really wanted to, playing any and all modern games on them is seemingly out of the question due to the power most of these games require. So there I was, taking a mandatory careers class in the school computer room where, despite the course's seemingly promising name, I was learning nothing of any particular use from a teacher who was detached from any sort of reality. So, you know, the typical public education experience. So I just sat there for weeks doing nothing after finishing the 10 minutes of work we were given over an hour to do, with my mind drifting off to Eorzea, thinking about raiding and running maps. However, that is when from across the room I spotted a kid playing that block game they are all obsessed with, and suddenly hope was sparked. You see, MMOs are designed to be able to run on basically a motherboard plugged into a potato, as long as you have a decent internet connection. This is an intentional design meant to pull players into the game without really having to worry about hardware barriers. Of course, for some very old computers, there is still a hardware barrier, and before seeing that stupid block game running fine on these decrepit old hunks of junk, I thought Final Fantasy XIV was beyond its capabilities. But with this new hope, I quickly checked the hardware specs and minimum 14 specs, only to find out the computer specs were only slightly below the minimum. But discarding this, I persevered, confident I could at least get the game to boot. This is where I ran into my first obstacle. You see, while school's technological prowess may not have greatly increased since back in the 2000s, the list of sites and programs they have blocked has, and they made it so anything more than simply downloading an exe was impossible without a passcode. Confused, I went to see what people had downloaded to get Minecraft to work, and turns out they had a third-party multiplayer client to run the game. This didn't help, and if anything it threw me for a loop. But not for long, as I quickly figured out a workaround. While the school may have blocked programs being downloaded directly onto the PC hard drive, and of course it's impossible to run programs that aren't downloaded, there was seemingly nothing that would hinder me running a program on the computer using data stored in an external source. This is basically a smart sounding way of me saying I copied the game files onto an external hard drive. So I came back the next day to test my theory, and found that the game launcher would run just fine, though it took a while to load. Happy with my progress and also getting distracted by my friends, I didn't actually try to play the game that day, having already decided I wanted to try and make some sort of video out of it, and, well, I guess this is that video you're watching now. So the following day I came back with the same external hard drive, except now it had 2 more programs downloaded onto it. The FF14 benchmark to actually get an accurate graph of what this hunk of junk could boast, and OBS to record the screen as I didn't want to film an old ass 4x3 monitor with my phone camera. However, when I tried to launch OBS, sure enough it ended up being auto-blocked by whatever protection program was on the computer, leaving me with no other option but to film the screen with my phone, which is why the footage you are about to see looks pretty bad. I apologize for that, but luckily I had planned for the possibility of this happening and had brought an old tripod with me, so at least the video is stable-ish. But I booted up the benchmark, and after trying and failing to import my character, I let the benchmark run and do its thing. The result was okay, but nothing amazing. The image was strangely squished to begin with, it was plagued by constant frame drops and stuttering, there was almost always tearing of some kind, and anything to do with VFX or semi-complex areas either didn't render properly or bogged down the entire benchmark. While it was nowhere even near an ideal situation, the fact that it would run to any sort of decent level was astounding to me, who still didn't believe I could actually get this thing to work. But the benchmark was running on the laptop standard preset, the lowest built-in graphics preset, and the computer's final ranking was fairly high. The wording of that ranking wasn't the most encouraging, but it led me to believe that the tearing and stuttering was more of a monitor issue. I mean, it's probably double the age of the computer itself. So then came the time to boot the actual game, and although for some reason I was forced to change my password, the game booted, luckily not meeting the same fate as OBS. Though it took more than 2 minutes to load the server info and another 4 to actually load into Shirogane, before long I was in the game. It was running on the standard laptop preset that it had used for the benchmark, and I thought that would be fine. That is, until I started moving around, only for the game to drop to an abysmal 5 FPS on average with the occasional spike to 7. Obviously, this wasn't going to work for actually playing the game, because a high of 7 FPS with major input lag would not cut it for a tank in an online game of any kind. So I spent the next 15 minutes or so just messing with graphics settings until I managed to get the game to a respectable 12 FPS. If you could play Shadow of the Colossus on the PS2 at that frame rate, I figured this would be fine. Best part, I was able to keep a good amount of the video effects so I could actually run content and read telegraphs, while also getting the visual feedback that I was doing my rotation correctly. After I fixed my UI to be a semblance of what I'm used to, for the first time since thinking of trying this out, I was actually confident I could play the game in a sort of playable state. So to warm up, I quickly solo queued for Akafa Amphitheater hard, and quickly started running through the fight. However, there is one part of any Shiva fight, and that is the ultimate test for if your computer can actually run the game, and well, I had completely forgotten about this. This mechanic is of course the phase change, or as many might know it, the step on me mechanic. In the ARR Shiva fight, which is of course what I was running, this is after the add phase when footsteps in the snow transitions into oblivion, Shiva freezes everything and everyone and then plops down into the center of the room, setting off a huge VFX of ice and wind going everywhere. And well, on this crappy old machine, this just caused a hard crash to Windows. While this sucked, the game still ran, so by continuing to nerf VFX, I could theoretically be able to get through content without a hard crash. So I booted up the game once more, and once again messed around with graphics settings. Obviously, I disabled as many VFX options as I could find, and I think this caused the game to peak around 15 FPS, about triple what I started at. I quickly queued up for Expert Roulette and pretty much insta-queued into Matoya's Relict. Thanks Tank Privilege for making my life easier. Getting through the dungeon was surprisingly not that bad, and I didn't end up bumping into another crash. However, the stuttering and tearing continued, and though I hate to sound like a pussy, after the 15 minutes in this dungeon, my eyes were starting to hurt a bit. While I blamed the pain on the old ass monitor, the computer itself had also become boiling to the touch to the point where I feared to shut down from overheating. On top of this, I was constantly running into lag spikes, and if this was any sort of content above the brain dead easy dungeons in this game, I think it would have quickly turned into a wipe fest. But at the end of the day, I did get the game to run on a crappy school computer. Kinda. The settings I was playing at and how the game was running was far from ideal, and if I was trying to do anything more than the baseline casual content, I don't think I'd be able to stay alive with the constant stuttering and lag spikes. So while I did get the game to work, this is not a way I would want to play the game, and I feel by nuking all the graphics and effects to hell, it really does take away from the overall experience of the game. And it was also running at 15 FPS max, with that, yikes. That's just yikes. While I may have ended up accomplishing my goal, I was not satisfied with the results, and left feeling like I had just wasted a bunch of time, which I may or may not have continued doing by making this video. But regardless, I hope you got any sort of enjoyment out of this video. And if you didn't, well, first, I don't blame you, and second, this is just an outlier video, and I have another one more in line with my normal content coming out in a few days. Also, at the time of publishing, this is the week of FanFest 2021, so no doubt this is going to end up buried by videos focused on that. But anyways, I'm going to end the video there. As always, my name's Lokidum, thank you for watching, and have a great day.